Today, the only conflict we hear about is Israel-Iran, but there is a conflict that had captured the media for many years and has since been forgotten about.
That would be the Russia-Ukraine conflict that started in February of 2022. And today we're going to discuss what exactly about the Russia-Ukraine war.
Who's in the right, who's in the wrong, and what the U.S.'s role should be.
Okay, awesome.
Welcome to the Statesman's Table.
So where do we want to start, Austin?
Well, I think, who do you think's in the right?
Well, one, I think that the U.S. and its NATO allies provoked this attack, and this attack was predictable. Not to say who's right and who's wrong, but what I will say is that maybe everybody is not can be morally acceptable in this conflict.
Sure, but predictability is in no way relevant to the morality of an action. It was really predictable that Hitler was going to invade the Czechoslovakia or Austria or France or
But
Poland.
if you
that didn't make it right.
If you told him, or if you guided Hitler to invade Poland, France, would you be in the morally right?
You can argue that the U.S. and U.K. or Great Britain at the time did guide Hitler to do that through forcing Germany to not have a military, but then letting him rebuild one, giving him parts of Austria and Czechoslovakia. Those could be argued as guiding Hitler to then invade the rest of Europe. That doesn't make it right because that's clearly not right. He was a deranged dictator invading independent countries with legitimate governments.
But this is where we diverge, because Russia is different than Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany worked out of a theory of expansion for the German people. Now, their expansionist policies disregarded any other actions by the U.S. or the U.K. No matter what the U.K. done, I mean, we can talk about the Treaty of Versailles and how that destroyed the German population and created this resentment that then led to Nazi expansion. But their expansion was not because of what the UK did.
Well, largely their expansion, a large pitch that got many Germans on board with Hitler's ideas and plan was to make Germany a world superpower. The idea was that the USSR, the US, and Great Britain were all world superpowers, and they had this influence over the entire world. And why shouldn't Germany have that? They're the master race. They deserve it. They didn't really lose World War One. Everything was stripped from them, stolen. It's very much the same ideology that led to Russia's takeover of Ukraine, although with some key differences.
I wouldn't say that Russia had an imperial motive to take over Ukraine. I wouldn't say that the motive was purely imperial. I would say that this was a defensive action by Russia. I wouldn't say that this was offensive.
Are those inherently different?
Well, that's like saying that the United Kingdom was acting defensively in establishing colonies in the Americas.
Oh, you could argue.
You could make that. You could make that claim, but nothing that Spain was doing directly affected English citizens at that time.
Well, but from any standpoint, any imperial action could be argued as a defensive one in terms of other imperial nations surrounding it, threatening it. The Great Britain's expansion into the Americas could be argued as defensive from Spain's growing power, from Portugal's, France, Italy's growing power in terms of kingdoms, in terms of the landmass of Europe. Like, they could all be argued as defensive actions, as any imperial action could be. But at its heart, it's about expansion of the home of the land that's deserved. It's about becoming a superpower again. It's about having the influence over the world that they think they deserve, and that's what all imperial action is really about. And you can argue whether or not some imperial action is justified or not. I would probably argue that most British imperial action was pretty justified, or at least a moral good in terms of this.
So you would say that imperial action is justified.
I think it can be.
There are some people who would say that any imperial action is not justified.
Well,
whatsoever.
I think imperial action is justified by the legitimacy of the government and the justness of the government, and I think the British government was a pretty good government for a long period of time. I think it's British law and code and culture that led to the founding of America, and it was King George's divergence from this precedent and just government that led to America becoming independent. And so I think it was justified for a long period of time. I think the American Revolution was justified, but from the divergence of their government. But that isn't to say that all imperial action is justified. I think it entirely depends on the government that's expanding. I think American imperialism has long been justified in certain areas. I don't think Russia's imperialism has been justified since probably like the mid 1850s.
That's a wild claim. That's pretty wild. So let's
what's wild about that? How is that different from your claim?
Let's expand upon that, because I believe that Russia's expansion into Ukraine was justified.
So what makes imperialism justified?
It was completely justified by the standard that you just said, right?
So you would have to argue that Russia's government is a just government.
I would say that they are just now.
Why?
Because they uphold the statutes of their nation.
What's the purpose of a government?
Is to ensure the well-being of its citizens. Okay. To ensure I would believe that it's to ensure national unity and national prosperity.
Okay.
Right?
So do you think Russia's infringement on things like free speech, free travel, free press do that?
Well, these are only inherent rights in the U.S. This is true. I mean, there's really no other nation, no developed high superpower nation. The UK doesn't even have freedom of speech or freedom of press. You get detained for social media posts.
Yeah, and it's bad because that's an inherent right given to us by God, not our government.
But governments do not have an objection to. They don't object unless it's written within their constitution, which 90% of nations do not have this. They don't have an objective to uphold these standards.
Right, and that's bad. So the goal of a just government, should be to protect its citizens and their rights as established and given to us by God. This would be freedom of thought and expression, to express ideas, communicate ideas, debate ideas. This would be the freedom to defend yourself from criminals, from a tyrannical country. This would be freedom from oppression in general. The idea of the Constitution was not that the U.S. should protect the United States citizens of their rights. It was that the United States will acknowledge the rights given by God and protect their citizens' rights.
So by this definition, 90% of the world, like 90% of the nations within the world, do not have a legitimate government. Thus, it is the United States' obligation to ensure these rights, because all these other governments are illegitimate, and any move made by them is not justified.
I wouldn't say all governments are illegitimate. I think the UK right now is getting pretty close to an illegitimate government. I don't think it's quite there, because in general it still does the things a government is supposed to do in protecting citizens and their rights. And while the UK is probably a much better argument to have on whether it's a legitimate government or not than Russia, because Russia is so clearly not.
Well, we don't have any real true information coming in about Russia. We truly don't. Do we have any neutral media that's coming
kind of the point. Yeah, the only media we have coming in from them is clearly being paid off by them.
I would say that any other media is paid off by the opposite side.
Yeah, probably.
So how?
Because that's how funding works for media.
So if you can't like justify the information coming from people who are paid by Russia, you can't justify the information from people coming from the United States, because then you have to say
the difference in that is that the United States as a government is not funding the information it's pumping out. It's corporations within the United States with varying interests and ideologies.
How do you know that they're not getting paid by the U.S. government? USAID, USAID works to fund propaganda, which nobody knows we're not allowed to know
but
how much money. We don't know where these campaigns are going to.
But we in general know the framing of most of these companies because they're companies and they have to put out income statements, balance sheet statements if they're public companies, and even if they're not, there are still audits that take place. We at least know every news organization isn't being funded by the U.S. government, and even to the extent it would be, they still have the news organizations have the freedom to print whatever they want as given in the United States Constitution.
Okay. So, but what if these people who run these news organizations, they all do not like a certain, they don't like a certain agenda. They don't like a certain viewpoint. None of these people, even if the viewpoint is objectively wrong or objectively right,
I think you'd be really.
They will not. There is no neutral source within the United States that is a mass. There's no mass media source that's neutral.
Right.
And so there is no mass media source
they
that
don't
produces
agree.
neutral. Most of them do.
Most of them
if
do not.
If you flipped on any mass media, you go to the New York
Well, it
Times, Wall
depends
Street
on
Journal,
how you define
Fox,
mass media.
anything. I don't know how you would define it. Mass media would be your cable news televisions, all of your biggest online.
Well, so are you
newspaper.
defining it in content or viewership? Because those are different things.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, so content, is it their mass production of content, or viewership, is it their mass viewership? Because if it's viewership, someone like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens.
Well, mass media has always referred to these mass conglomerate,
but the media industry has changed significantly over the years.
But what we're talking about is the mass influence, like the mass media campaign influences, which is influenced by Fox News, CNBC, NBC, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. All of these have
those would be mainstream media.
Mainstream media, mass media, whatever. Mainstream media promotes all one agenda. They promote one viewpoint on one certain issue. And that's where we have to ask, and we have to go deeper, why is this view being pushed, and what are legitimate claims on the other side?
But media in this country isn't entirely comprised of them, and you can see that they're not even reaching the audience that some low podcasts are.
Because of how inaccurate their claims are and how everybody can see how
that just shows they're not the media in the United States. There's lots of different media it's pushing lots of different views. That's why people need to watch varying coverage of the same events to determine what's right.
Now here's the thing. What do most of our politicians listen to?
I think it depends.
Mainstream media, it's 100,000. I know our president sits and watches mainstream
Fox
media.
News. Yeah, he probably just watches Fox News.
And then I bet every member of his cabinet does so the same.
I don't think that's true. I bet JD Vance watches things other than Fox News, although that's probably one of his favorites. Marco Rubio probably watches different things. But there's no evidence to support this.
But what I'm saying is that mass media or mainstream media has a huge foothold on the American political mind. Those who are politically savvy consume mainstream media.
I don't think that's true.
That is true.
Well, so Trump really won the 2024 election because he focused on things like podcasts and YouTubers and things like that over the mainstream media. He went on like Theo Vaughn's podcast. He had an interview with Logan Paul. It was things like that won the election. He had one
with Logan Paul? I know he had
Am I misremembering this? It was Jake Paul? I don't know. It was something similar.
I thought it was Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan.
Yeah, he also had one with Joe Rogan, but it was someone like Logan Paul. Am I misremembering this?
I don't think he was not on Impulsive, because that would have been crazy. Impulsive, that would have been insane. That would have done.
Someone important was.
That would have. I think maybe JD Vance was probably on.
Okay.
I mean, someone also was. Trump wasn't on the Nelk Boys, was he? Podcast?
I don't know. But it was largely things like podcasts and YouTube that made the difference in the 2024 election.
I would say Kamala Harris's incompetency led to the huge discretion that we've seen in the 2024 presidential election. Because she may have been the most incompetent presidential candidate we have probably ever seen in our lifetime.
Yeah.
In our lifetime, she was extremely incompetent. I mean, she got thrust into the political spectrum, what was it, 6 months before the election?
I don't
I mean,
remember.
it was something insane like that. There's no way that she was ever going to win. But back to the point, I don't think that the podcast was the defining factor.
Sure, but it at least goes to show that
It
what
should,
Americans are consuming isn't the mainstream media. It's a variety of different media outlets. They're getting their news from Instagram, Facebook. The reason AI has been such a problem on Facebook is because that's where millions of Americans get their news. They get it from Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit. It's not coming from MSNBC or
yeah,
CNN or Fox News. Some of it might be.
yeah. But let's go back to my claim: is that all of these sources, all the mainstream media sources, promote one agenda. They promote one agenda. So isn't that suspicious?
But if you go by viewership, they're not all promoting the same agenda. Even if you
They
were to
are.
say that MSNBC, CNN, ABC, and Fox News were promoting the same agenda, that's wrong on like 99% of
Well,
issues.
but there's one issue that it's not, and that's the Russia-Ukraine war. That's what we're talking about right now.
Fox News
That's
is relatively pro Russia.
no, they're not.
I mean, it's
They
host dependent, but like you can find some
I've
wild
just
clips.
seen yesterday where they had Vladimir Zelensky on for like the 86th time, and everybody is in there just like
So
sucking up to him all the time. And Fox News actively promotes this constantly. They don't ever go out and say that Vladimir Zelensky is the reason why the Russia-Ukraine war is still going on today. His
I
reluctance.
think Fox News is a bad example for this because I think they've said very similar things.
I don't think so.
I think it's host dependent, but it's like
Well, every piece of media that I've consumed that has Fox News and Ukraine in it has been very pro-Ukraine, very pro that they like maybe not fiscally. They want us to be fiscally responsible, but they want us to be morally. They want us to think that Ukraine is this helpless state that should just fight till it just fight to the death. That it should just fight till it dies. Which Russia does not want a full annexation of Ukraine. They want an annexation of 5 territories. Right now, they already control 3, and I can't name all of them because they're weird names. But it's like Donetsk, Luhansk, all these. And there was many times. There's been at least 5 times when Russia and Ukraine could have had a ceasefire negotiations, which could have eventually led to the ending of this bloody war. But Zelensky has blew up negotiations every single time. Russia has not blown up any of these negotiations.
Well, I think in terms of negotiations, you could make the argument for either side because Russia is asking for these 5 territories and is unwilling to give them up.
That they already hold 70% of these territories. This would,
right, but they're not theirs to hold. Ukraine is a legitimate government that held these territories.
I would not say that Ukraine is a legitimate government. They have not held legitimate elections
since the start of the
years.
war.
No, in like 20 years. Have you heard about their election fraud scandal that happened in the Euromaidan protests?
Yes, but that's not the same thing as every election was fraudulent in the last.
Well, they have a very new, unstable. I wouldn't even call it a democracy. I call it an aristocracy, which is what they have. Which the United States has promoted this civil unrest in Ukraine because they do want something that's different than a pro-Russia government. But statistically, Ukrainians have voted for pro-Russia pundits over and over and over and over until we look at my notes here. Until about 2013, when Yanukovych was elected. Supposedly, he was pro. Actually, he wasn't even pro-Russian. He was going to try to get Ukraine to join the EU. But then he had a meeting with Vladimir Putin, and then he no longer wanted to join the EU.
Oh, I wonder why.
But think about this. The CIA, there have been CIA cooperatives that came out and said that we had a role in instigating the Euromaidan protests that came after this, which the Euromaidan protests effectively uprooted the Ukrainian government. They no longer had a government. They had to get a European Union sanctioned government, what they called the government of new unity. So this is, even if they do have a democracy, it is extremely new, and it was built off of civil unrest that was maybe coerced by the U.S. government.
So your stance is U.S. imperialism is bad, but Russian imperialism is good.
That's not my. I think the context matters.
So if
And
the current
I'm
government was
explaining.
propped up by the United States, that would be United States imperialism. That would mean the United States would be at least generally behind the government.
What I would say is that they are doing a moral wrong to Ukrainian citizens because they did have a duly elected member of parliament. Well, this would be a prime minister, where they had a duly elected prime minister in which the U.S. instigated an overthrow. I'm not going to weigh in on whether this is, but my point is that the United States, alongside its NATO allies, instigated this war in Ukraine. So that's where I'm getting at, is that Russia will look at this overthrow of the Ukrainian government as a direct hit to their sphere of influence. Would they not?
Sure,
That's
but
like-
it's not. It's not a justification for invasion.
It is when you look at it through Russia's perspective. Because the
Yeah, that's what they claim, but it's not a moral justification of invasion.
In what sense?
In the sense that Russia does not have the claim to the land that the Ukrainian government does.
I would argue that Russia has an equal claim. Or Russia has a claim to those 5 areas, and then they may have a claim to Kyiv. So those 5 areas are majority Russian speaking, and over many referendums, they have voted that they want to be a part of Russia multiple times. Ukraine doesn't want to give this up. I mean, it's obvious in Crimea, they didn't want to give up Crimea. Crimea voted their referendums, 95% they wanted to be a part of Russia. But what I'm saying here is that it's like saying if Russia came and overthrew Canada's election, would the U.S. not act?
I think we're close to acting now.
I don't think
just
we are.
Based on.
Oh, like invading Canada, or
mostly joking, but
I mean,
but I think if Russia interfered with a Canadian election, that'd be inherently different because the Russian government is an immoral government, while the American government is a moral one.
How could you say that the United States is a moral government?
Generally speaking. Generally speaking, the foundations of the American government is a moral foundation with moral systems and generally moral actions unless perpetuated by immoral politicians.
Which, are there any moral politicians?
J.D. Vance, I think, is pretty moral.
But going up...
Ron DeSantis, Ted Cruz.
Ron DeSantis is a moral politician?
Mark Wayne Mullen, James Langford.
I would say that... Are you just naming off Oklahoma representatives now?
I can name up more Oklahoma representatives, more Oklahoma government if you'd like.
No, it's
fine.
I think
Kevin Stitt's probably... Kevin Stitt's pretty moral. The current Attorney General, Gentner Drummond's pretty moral.
How many of them... No, never mind. I'm going to leave that behind.
But
what I'm going to say is that the United States has actively participated in moral actions. Let's look at MK Ultra, for example.
Sure.
Let's look at the CIA. Okay.
No one's denying that they participated in immoral actions.
Yes.
It's the system of government that I'm making a claim for.
Yeah, but nobody would adhere to these standards. Nobody adheres to these standards in power politics and international relations. Nobody.
But that doesn't make it. It doesn't make it good.
No, it doesn't make it good. But what I'm talking about is realism.
Right, but you can be realistic and good in this situation. This isn't a situation where you have to pick between the best options and worst options.
That's not how international actors act. So states act in self-interest 100% of the time.
Right.
Unless you're influenced by another government, in which sometimes you may act in...
Do you have any examples of this?
I would say that the United States intervening in Iran would be extremely against our self-interest. Because one, it destroys our economy. Our gas prices are destroyed.
Destroyed.
I mean...
They're not even at Biden levels.
I'm paying $3.18 at the pump, but people in California are paying $7. People in Hawaii, probably more. Our economy has been ravaged by this war. Seriously, inflation has went up. Our standards of living have gone down. Iran holds most of the negotiating advantage because they have the Strait of Hormuz. We don't have any...
But they held that before the war started. That's not like a new advantage.
But what I'm saying
is a reason for the war.
No, it's not. Because there was no nuclear capabilities within Iran.
But the argument isn't that there was, it's that they were striving for one. And that can't be allowed because they hold things like the Strait of Hormuz. They're hostile to American allies in the area, such as Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE. They're hostile to America. They cannot be allowed to have such a nuclear option. They cannot be allowed to have the sway over our economy that they do with the Strait of Hormuz that must be taken from them.
No, it must not be. This is at the expense of every single American that we have to have gained these objectives. And this has been a failure for us generally. This has been
It hasn't been a success.
This has been an
It hasn't been
extreme
a
failure. This has ravaged our economy, and we've gotten nowhere. There is no way that we could go and take over Iran just by killing a few of its leaders. Think about this.
So realistically, we could. It's a matter of commitment, and the issue right now is that the goals, we're not committing as much as we should for the goals we wish to achieve.
Yeah.
And you can argue that the goals aren't strong enough for the level of commitment that would be taken. I think that's a pretty good argument.
Well, I don't even think
But
that we could go take over Iran, even if we sent foot troops like we did with Iran or Afghanistan and Iraq.
You know what the second largest air force in the world is?
Second largest?
Yeah,
Who?
the United States Navy. You know what the largest is?
That point is Iran is a country with 90 million people. And it is roughly the size of like 2 Texases, right?
Right, but like as Trump said, we could turn it into a parking lot.
Why haven't we?
Because we don't want that level of commitment.
We have tried
to turn it into a parking
lot. We
We
have tried to level everything. We've spent
have
billions.
Not tried to
we've
level
probably
everything.
spent about $1 trillion. I mean,
That's probably true.
We've hit water salination plants. We have hit all civilian infrastructure almost. And
not
yet,
quite yet.
Well, here's the thing.
We're getting there.
I think that what we're doing is morally wrong and it's morally unachievable. Because what I would say is that by us going in and bombing all their leaders, all the Iranian people are not going to say, "Well, you killed the imam. We now love you guys." No, this is going to breed. Killing a terrorist breeds 3 more, because these people do not see us as liberators. They see us as their enemy. So what I'm saying is that if we would have tracked back to June, all these factors are stacking against us for invading Iran. Maybe invading Iran is good for maybe it is good for self-interest in the long term if we were able to take them over. But we should have strategically aligned ourselves in a greater winnable position, because we started the war we still are in an almost unwinnable position. Unless we were to gather NATO allies, we are in an extreme and then we were to launch a land invasion to take over the nation. But then we couldn't even there's no way we could hold the nation.
Well, so it would be a matter of having the right structures in place. It would be the thing with Iran is that the level of commitment needed to achieve what needs to be achieved is probably too high. But if we were able to take the Strait of Hormuz and usher in a regime change with the same level of ease we were able to capture Venezuela's dictator, or if we were able to do that with the same level of ease the U.S. government does anything else in foreign affairs, then it would be a very good thing for the United States, for the Iranian people, for surrounding nations. It's a matter of what can be done.
Yeah, but we
in terms of whether or not
what I'm saying is that we acted
needs to be done
against our self-interest because we knew it probably couldn't be done. We know that
I think we thought it could,
but our positioning was too weak. Our negotiation tactics are weak.
I think what's probably the case is that our leadership became overconfident with the extreme success that was the capture of Maduro.
Yeah.
And it led leadership in general to think we can do anything with the same level of ease, and Iran just is a different.
Yeah. But we also, I think that we were fed false intel that we could take them over, and that Iran did.
That's probably also.
And I think that we also received false intel that Iran held nuclear capabilities.
No one has ever claimed they held nuclear capabilities. What? Where are you hearing
all
this?
These months
Not
within the war?
One person has ever said that.
That is not true.
They said they're trying to build one.
They said they're trying to build nuclear facilities, as in for energy. They have Hadith. The Iranian has Hadiths.
The claim that the United States government has made, the claim that
their
Israel
claim was that they could not have
Iran.
nukes. That was stated by
The
Donald
claim is
Trump.
that
I will
they're
do
trying to
anything.
make nuclear weapons, which it looks like they are from the way that they're building nuclear power facilities. Okay, it's just not
You know
what they're doing
you
isn't
know what's the
reasonable
thing
for
with
that.
that is
It's
that all of our intelligence agencies says they weren't.
That's
Every
not true.
every
You've heard this
intelligence.
from
No,
one guy who left the government.
you mean the director of counternational intelligence or counterterrorism? The
Right, but
guy
that's
who
one
has
source.
the
The
highest
rest of the US
security
government
clearance, and
has said that they were trying to build one.
because they're politically influenced. They're being politically influenced. They're being paid and manipulated to say these things. The one guy who resigned from his job because he had a moral obligation against this war said that a report was given to our president that was headed by all 12 national intelligence agencies. And it said that Iran was not developing or in the process of developing any nuclear technology beyond energy infrastructure.
So you're talking about the political interest of everyone currently in the government. What about the political interest of this one person who's come out and said this? They're facing lots of media coverage. They're media darlings right now
They
from
lost
a lot of the
they lost their
far right
job. They
circles.
lost any political
Willingly, they
instability in the
willingly left
future.
their job. They did not. It's not political uncertainty. There have so many friends in politics right now, even because of this.
Joe Kent did not gain anything from coming out about this information. I don't think he had he had a minute of fame on the Tucker Carlson podcast and some other podcasts, but he did not overall benefit from coming out. This was a decision, this was a sacrifice for him to come out against the political structure and to come out and say, hey, what we're doing is wrong. What we're doing was unsubstantiated, and I believe that false intel was given and that our president was misaligned. Which you and me both agree our president was misaligned into instigating this war. Well, his main misalignment.
I think with the objectives we went in and the means by which we went to achieve those objectives was in some way wrong.
Well, I think that the pretext to the war, because obviously this is from Joe Kent, that the information given to our president was that Iran is building these nuclear facilities here, and their main objective is to blow the United States off the map. And Donald Trump received intelligence information from our own sources that said they're not. But he received intelligence from a different source who may not be from our intelligence agencies that said no, they do. And they will come and wipe us off the map. And this is what started the war. Because
so even Trump, with a lot of those claims, all of our intelligence agencies didn't claim they weren't trying to build one. They claimed they weren't close. They claimed that
they claimed there was no.
They claimed that the operation back in what was it?
It wasn't. Is this Epic Fury?
This is Epic Fury. Was Midnight Hammer?
Midnight Hammer.
Okay, Midnight Hammer.
But this was pre-Midnight Hammer. Well, what I'm talking about, what I'm saying.
Then what do you think the point of Midnight Hammer was?
The point of Midnight Hammer was to destroy these nuclear facilities. Mm-hmm. But I believe that there was no nuclear facilities. That our president was misaligned into thinking that there were nuclear facilities.
So you think even Midnight Hammer was a mistake?
Yes, because one, we don't even know where these bombs were dropped. We don't know what they blew up. We don't know. There's only a few handful of people who know exactly where we dropped these bombs or what. We basically just spent and lost a lot of money. We basically lost a ton of money. This backfalls on the American taxpayer for what? I mean, what did we gain from Midnight Hammer?
So we can go over the goals again. I mean, from Midnight Hammer?
Why did we go into Midnight Hammer?
The goal was to set back Iran's nuclear development programs.
Yeah, which we didn't.
U.S. intelligence has said we did.
No, they didn't?
Yes, they have.
That's not what they said.
That's what the Trump administration has released.
That's what the Trump administration said. That's not what our intelligence agency
That's what the U.S. government is.
No, it's not. The U.S. government is not the intelligence agency.
Who comprises the U.S. government? Who is in current control of the U.S. government?
Three branches. The judiciary, the executive, and the legislative branch.
Okay.
We got one piece of info, not from the intelligence agencies, but from the White House, saying that these were destroyed.
Who oversees the intelligence agencies?
The legislative branch.
In an administrative role.
I would say that the CIA operates independently from the executive branch, pretty independently. Because
CIA is probably
yeah, but FBI, they don't have any role in this.
right, but the idea of these intelligence agencies is really behind the executive branch in that they work with the military and enforcing laws and keep holding
Okay,
security.
so if we did destroy their nuclear capabilities, like we said, we did, our pretext for going back to war with them was that they
Was that they didn't give up, not that
they
they
were
had
they
the
were still
capabilities.
developing these, and we are still in danger. How
It
in
was
the
not
world?
we are still in danger, it's we will be in danger in probably like 30 years.
That's not what Marco Rubio said. Marco Rubio said that the reason we are in this war is because Israel was going to strike, and therefore we needed to strike with them. He was caught on video. I mean, he said this to a press reporter in Congress. He didn't say that we're going here to achieve objective A, B, B, and C for the United States. He said, no, Israel was going to go finish the job, and we are obligated to go with Israel. Which is
right. I feel like you're misunderstanding this comment, though. It's not that Israel forced us into it. It's that Israel saw objectives. We also saw objectives. Israel decided to strike now, so we had to strike with them.
Why are we at the mercy of a
We're
nation
not at their mercy.
We are, based by definition, by the facts that we have just stated, we are at the heels of
Israel
Israel.
does not have any real control over the U.S. government. They have
That is
disproportionate. They have disproportionate influence to other nations, but they do not have control.
They have extreme influence, and they probably will if the NDAA gets signed.
They do not have control though. Like it's disproportionate influence.
They
it's
have
not control, and it's because they're an ally in such a volatile region and hostile region. It's because they're an ally in such a hostile region. It's not because
the United States acts against herself. The United States acts against their self-interest multiple times by siding with Israel. We lose money, we lose men, we lose all this stuff just to keep Israel alive.
So this isn't all the time. You noticed how we started this episode by saying the media is consumed by Iran, Israel.
Yes.
We're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about another conflict.
We're gonna keep going. It's already too late. It's already too late.
Sure.
We can circle back at some point.
Yeah, I guess.
So what I'm saying, nations act in their self-interest 100% of the time. Unless they are influenced, this is my claim, by a government who holds influence over them, which then would make that country insovereign. Country A insovereign. Who is acting against their people's self-interest.
So you think what makes a country's actions good is whether or not it's in their own self-interest?
I mean, that would make sense. That would be because
so you think the morality of any action is whether or not it's in the nation's best interest.
Yes, because if it is truly in the nation's self-interest, this would be to promote the welfare of the citizens in which this government inhabits.
If it was in the U.S.'s best interest to turn the entire Middle East into a parking lot, you think that would be good?
If it was in the United States' self-interest to do so, that means that an action opposite of that would lead to the death of American citizens, or at least the well-being of Americans is drastically decreasing.
It would be that the American well-being would increase in some regard. It would increase more than it decreases. That would be what best interest is.
Yes. And so at that point, a nation is acting in their self-interest, which we laid down earlier was a government's job is to promote the peace, welfare of its citizens, right?
During the Korean War, should the United States have used nuclear weapons against the USSR and China?
No, because that would have wiped out. Russia would have just nuked everybody.
Russia did not have nuclear weapons at the time of the Korean War.
Are you sure?
The reason General MacArthur said we should nuke China during the Korean War is because Russia did not yet have the capabilities, and we should use them while we are the sole nation with that advantage.
That would have alleviated a bunch of problems that we face now.
So you think the use of nuclear weapons during the Korean War would have been a good thing?
Maybe if we would have only nuked China and North Korea, because
so you just agree with General MacArthur?
I believe that his stance wasn't. I mean, it wasn't completely stupid.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's still a leap to say that any action in the nation's best interest is always good. Like the reason
is justifiable for that nation. Whether it is, I think good and justifiable are different.
I would agree.
Good, yeah. So I wouldn't say that because it would be in my self-interest to go rob a bank because if I wouldn't get caught because I would have a bunch of money.
Right.
That doesn't make that action good.
But you would say it's justifiable.
It would be justifiable if me not robbing the bank had me starving to death, and that was my only other option.
Your only other option was robbing the bank.
I mean, that's what people face. I mean, this is hypothetical.
Okay, what's your basis for morality in this situation then? Just human prosperity?
I mean, I think states act at a different level than us individuals do. States have different obligations.
Okay, sure.
Yes.
But still, what is the moral basis for your idea of how people or states should act?
That's different. People.
So you have different moral bases for the two?
Yes.
Okay, what's your moral basis for people?
Is that they need to adhere. Okay, us as Christians, believe they need to adhere to the standards set by God.
Yes.
As their basis for morality.
Would you not say the Bible outlines principles for how a government should act? Even if you think those principles are different, which there's a good argument for, is the moral foundation there not the same of biblical Christian values and morals?
I don't think so.
Okay, so your foundation is self-interest.
Actually, I don't know. Let me walk this back because there are many times let's go back to the Old Testament when God is commanding, David and Solomon. He commands them many times to wipe out the enemy, or Moses to wipe out the enemy.
Yes.
So I would say that they may be the same. But
so you think the biblical standard for national morality is self-interest?
It's almost pretty close. Because.
But not exact. So what?
Well, because you have other actors involved, it would be contextual.
Okay. So it's not self-interest. It's something different.
It is.
What is the moral basis for national morality?
It would be self-interest, but with context. Because sometimes your
context is needed in that regard. Is it?
You have an enemy.
Okay.
You defeat them in battle.
Yes.
But there is a possibility that they will come back and rise against you. Therefore, wiping them out would be in your self-interest and would be morally justifiable because it has been commanded. I mean, in Moses' case, it was commanded by God to do so. This is a strategic moral victory.
Right, but what's the context that makes it differ from self-interest in this case? Just the idea of having an enemy? Because would that not be the same as self-interest? Because if you have an enemy, it's in your best interest to wipe them out.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that.
So you think the biblical standard for morality on a national level is self-interest?
Pretty close.
But not exact.
It depends on context. Here's the thing, I would have to evaluate it.
What context would make it different?
I don't know how to find one.
So it's not the standard.
Well, one, I would say this. I would say in that situation that you said with General MacArthur, mass wiping out Christians is different than mass wiping out a pagan enemy, right?
Yeah.
So then it would be in your self-interest to go and nuke Russia, China, Korea, but your moral obligation in that situation would be to probably leave out Russia for now. Unless they posed a greater nuclear threat in which you then would have to nuke them.
Further, I think MacArthur just suggested China. I don't think he suggested North Korea and Russia.
Okay.
But that was part of my hypothetical.
Okay. Well, in that case, you have to, okay, this is if you're abiding by morals. If you are a Christian leader, nuking China and North Korea would be sensible in this situation, because then there would not be a threat in the future to your Christian base. But nuking a civilization of Christians that do not pose a threat yet.
Russia in the 1950s would not have been a civilization of Christians. They would have been explicitly against the Christian church at the time.
I'm not sure about that.
Well,
because the Russian Orthodox
the
Church
Bolshevik Revolution, much like the French Revolution, was as much a revolution against the established religion as it was the established government. It was very much your king has no authority because your God has no authority. That was the basis for both of them. While contrasted with something like the American Revolution, where the basis was God has more authority than you, therefore we rebel. It's the difference that makes the Bolshevik and French revolutions unjust and the American one just. So it's Russia at this time, a few decades prior, fought a revolution against religion and Christianity specifically. So, at least at the time, wiping out much of Russia would likely not have been wiping out a large population of Christians.
And in that case, I would say that that is morally justifiable, because it is in your self-interest, and because it would help the people out that you are trying to govern and hold in prosperity.
Even if not all three nations posed a direct threat to your own at the time?
Well, here's the thing, we're looking at hindsight.
Yeah.
Because it would be like, oh, well, now we know that Russia has all these nukes and now we're in the stalemate.
Right.
But back then, did Russia pose that threat that we now know?
I mean, Russia is what won World War II.
Yeah, but did we know that they, like, what you, like in your hypothetical earlier, you're like, should we strike now because we know that they don't have nukes? We only superpower has nukes. Well, did we know at the time that anybody else was going to develop a nuke?
Probably we knew they were in development.
We did.
We thought they would. Yeah, we thought they would take a lot longer, but we knew they were trying to. We thought they would take a lot longer, but some scientists from the Manhattan Project were spies and helped them out, and so they achieved it a lot sooner than expected. And so, but at the time, we knew they were developing it. We also knew they did not quite yet have it.
Well, in that case,
we were pretty confident. I guess we didn't know for certain, but like,
didn't know for certain.
I guess.
Well, in that case, they don't pose a threat to us of that number.
Russia did not pose a threat to the United States
in nuclear sense. In nuclear sense, they did not. If they did not have nuclear weapons,
they were developing nuclear weapons.
We know that now.
We knew that then.
Okay, well, in this context, you're saying that an atheist nation is developing nuclear weapons. And we know for sure they are developing nuclear weapons. That's the thing, is that we know for sure. And that their number one target is us. Okay? The key word is that we know for sure. Taking action against that nation would be justifiable.
Okay, so your claim is that in the 1950s, the United States should have gone to war with the USSR because we knew they would pose a larger threat in the future.
If we would have been able, if we had logistical ways and if we had the strategic superiority, and we knew that we could have done this without an extreme loss of life, because at some point, an extreme loss of life counteracts your state self-interest. Sure. There's other factors that come into play, because obviously invading Russia would be extremely hard, extremely difficult. Okay? So there has to be factors in place before you can say. That's why I'm saying context matters, because there are certain actions that could both be
sure, but you're not explaining any context that isn't just self-interest would actually be a little different in the situation.
So like, it's still at its my claim of self-interest is then
okay. One. So you do think biblical national morality is acting in a nation's self-interest
when you are as a government, when you are a government housing over, when you have a government in charge of people. Yes.
What if it is in a nation's best self-interest to wipe out another Christian nation?
That's
Like if it was in the U.S.'s interest to like take over the UK when it was really Christian.
it would be, well, one, we would go into context. We would say, what threat is the United Kingdom posing to the U.S.?
But in this hypothetical, let's just say in this hypothetical, it's absolutely certain that wiping out the United Kingdom would cause the United States to prosper.
I think it goes to an extent, because at a certain point, wiping out people, like mass genociding people, I don't think ever adds to self-interest.
But like hypothetically, if it did,
okay, so we're talking.
Let's say the entire population wanted to kill all Americans, so we had to wipe them out for the same reasons Israel had to wipe out nations in the Old Testament.
Okay, well, if it's the same context, then yes.
But say they were also Christian. Like I'm not saying God commanded it. I'm saying like the reasoning behind why God commanded it. Like the same. But they were also Christian.
So the United States is at war with. Okay, the United States is at war with the United Kingdom. Yes, in this scenario, yes.
No. We're nice allies, but we know for certain that wiping them out would benefit us extremely. Would it be just to do so?
Now, how would this work in the scenario? Because trade, like,
okay, doesn't matter. So it's a hypothetical.
So it's extremely isolated.
Yes, extremely isolated.
So extremely isolated
doesn't impact anything else.
Extremely isolated. There's two options.
Because this is a hypothetical.
There's two options.
Mm-hmm.
You wipe out the United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
The United States prospers generously.
Yes.
Or if you don't wipe them out, the United States is hurt and people die in the United States, right?
Yeah.
Now,
let's even say a fewer number of Americans would die than wiping out the UK would be.
So so more Americans die if we do nothing than if we went to war with them.
Right.
Okay, that's the claim. With all of these,
in this
hypothetical isolated situation, that would be morally justifiable in our self-interest.
Just because it's in our self-interest?
Yeah, yes, because you're, as a government, your obligation is to promote the welfare of the people. And if you take a action that actively goes against the welfare of the people, that cannot be in your self-interest.
Right, but the basis for protection is still morality. Like the reason a nation has a duty to protect its citizens is because it is wrong for them not to. Yes. Just as it would be wrong for them to wipe out another nation.
I think that
for prosperity or safety when it hurts another just nation to a greater degree than they would be hurt.
I don't think that this scenario would ever happen.
Right, but that's not the point. The point is to get down to the basis of your morality.
I don't think that makes any sense, because you're automatically assuming that the state's objective of holding its moral objective of holding
the goal
the
is not to be practical or a realistic situation. The goal is to get down to the basis of your morality.
Yeah. We're getting there.
Okay.
So you made a claim that the state's objective morality in upholding the welfare of its citizens is lesser when it comes to the extent of others. That's what your claim was. Because you're saying that it was a just nation. Well, I don't think it's your claim to make sure it's a just nation or not. Nobody can make that claim. But I don't think either way, it is a government's obligation to its people only. A government does not have an obligation.
I would agree.
The United States does not have any obligation to any other nation besides the United States, fundamentally.
I would agree.
Fundamentally.
But I think I would argue the moral basis for a nation's actions would be, does it serve the goal of what a nation is? And that is to protect its citizens and their rights. And in that, there is still the idea of morality, that what makes a human life and a human rights valuable in that they are created by God. And so in this situation, it would not be protecting its citizens to reach out and cause unjust harm to another.
But that wasn't the situation that we had. I just outlined the two choices we had. Actively letting the United Kingdom live would be not protecting your citizens. That's what we outlined.
Well, it would be it would not be leading to prosperity. The prosperity is what came from eliminating the UK.
Well, that's not that wasn't our scenario. Because I asked.
Okay, let's.
I said.
Fine, sure. Let's have it be a different scenario then. Let's say the United States, the UK, they exist independently. They're both very Christian nations,
Okay.
like the most Christian nations that have ever existed.
Okay.
Okay, and now the US just turning the UK into a parking lot would lead for every single person in the US to have a significantly better quality of life. Does the US do that now? Is it moral? Because it is 100% in their self interest, but it does not protect the United States citizens' rights or life, but it does increase their prosperity. Is it then a just genocide? Is it then a just genocide?
Is it then a just genocide? So how many people? So are lives sacrificed by wiping out the United Kingdom?
No, not a single U.S. life.
Not a
is
single
only
U.S.
life is improved.
Okay, so only life is improved prosperity.
Yes.
What is the action outcome, or not even outcome? Like, what is the threat that if we don't do this?
Nothing. Everything stays exactly the same, but everyone in the nation has a significantly better quality of life if this action is taken.
But if we don't do this, trade is still open.
Trade has no impact on the situation. Trade has no impact on the situation.
So in isolated, there's Kingdom A, Kingdom B.
Yes.
Okay. And if Kingdom A wipes out Kingdom B, nobody dies, and
nobody dies
because we need to isolate away from nation states. And let's just talk about if we're gonna get fundamental.
Sure. Yes.
So
yes.
If Kingdom A takes out Kingdom B. Okay.
Right. Everyone in Kingdom A prospers. Not a single life is made worse in Kingdom A. Everyone is happier and better and lives more comfortably. But Kingdom B doesn't exist anymore. Will never exist anymore. Well, no children will come from it. It's gone. It's erased from history. Like everything about it is gone. Those lives are lost. Those rights are lost. The government is lost. The land is lost. But everything is better in Kingdom A. Is it justified?
Yes. This has happened throughout millennia. This has happened constantly throughout the feudal and Middle Ages.
Yes, but when it's justified, it's because it protects the lives and rights of the citizens.
That's not
because it makes their lives better.
You defined a term earlier, and then now you're adding stuff to this term.
What term have I? What term have I?
Justifiable. Justifiable.
I'm defining my term. I'm defining my justifiability. I was searching for yours, and now I'm defining mine with the idea of lives and rights and defending them.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So does prosperity not lead? Because now that we're in an isolated scenario, you're saying that prosperity does not lead to the protection of rights or the protection of people's lives.
No, it's just prosperity. Everyone has more money to spend. They have nicer couches, nicer phones, more land to live on, more food to eat.
Now,
the more gyms to work out at.
Does that not directly increase life expectancy, which then would increase?
No, it doesn't. Not in this situation.
How in the world does that make any sense?
Not in this situation.
That doesn't make any sense.
Because this is a hypothetical situation. It's magic, okay? Some fairies have come in, and they've said, ooh, everything's better, but nothing about life changes.
Everything's better, but nothing changes.
Exactly.
That doesn't make any sense.
So now I'm talking about that.
There's a paradoxical argument within this argument. What is this?
Okay. No, but they think like the quality of life changes, but no new rights are protected, and no life would have been lost otherwise.
So we're going off of your definition of justifiability.
No. We're going off of yours. I want to know what you think is justifiable in this situation. I think it would not be justifiable because justifiable actions by nations are actions that protect its citizens' life or rights or lead to the prosperity of the nation without undue harm to the innocent.
So in this highly isolated scenario, I believe that would I would agree with you. But this scenario...
Okay, so that means your basis isn't self-interest.
It is basically self-interest. By that definition. Okay? It would be in your self-interest to leave other people alive. To protect your own morality. Because then you would be immoral.
How can...
Because would it be in your self-interest to hate yourself?
Okay, but then how can you claim it's in Russia's self-interest to do these immoral actions because they get a little bit more land?
That's not the objection.
Yes, I know that's not their claim, but that's the reality.
That's not even my claim.
The
That's not
U.S.
true.
is not going to invade Russia if Ukraine joins NATO.
That's not what I'm saying. My claim is that NATO expansion has led to Russian defensive action.
Right, but
So
the action isn't justifiable because it's based on a lie.
how is it a lie?
The fear is that NATO will invade Russia and infringe on their sovereignty. That's not going to happen.
How do you know that?
Because generally speaking,
You
the
don't know that.
United States is founded on a just system of government, and about half the time is run by just people.
If the United States had a real chance to wipe out Russia, they would do so. That is undeniable fact.
I don't think that's true. Or even if it is, it's solely because Russia is a active threat to the United States.
I don't believe they are.
There probably aren't anymore, but that's
But
why I'm saying they want it. Like the U.S. would not wipe them out right now because they're not an active threat.
Yeah. But let's examine the facts that led to the Russia-Ukraine war. Okay. In 2008, there was a Bucharest summit. Okay. Do you know what happened at the 2008 Bucharest summit?
I don't.
So this was after the NATO. Okay, NATO was founded to combat Russia, right? So let's look at Russia. Russia views NATO as its direct, because of Article 5, this is the most dangerous threat that Russia has, because an attack on them means an attack on it from everybody, right? Which would include nuclear warfare, states that hold nuclear weapons.
Sure.
So NATO has had continuous eastward expansion since the fall of the Soviet Union. And they grabbed up states like Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, all these states that are on its eastern border. Okay? So there are certain states that Russia has seen as a extreme encroachment on their sphere of influence.
Yes.
And that's because they have been a great power within the world. Great powers do not like to see their sphere of influence minimized.
That's true.
That is true. So the biggest threat that Russia has, the biggest threat to annihilation that Russia has, Russia views NATO as its direct counterpart. When you are almost a full encirclement, you will produce action. Because Russia views NATO expansion as a direct hit to their sphere of influence.
Yes.
Okay. So my claim was that NATO expansion led to a defensive action by Russia. Because if we look back in 2008,
right, but to claim defense, you have to show evidence for a future offensive action. Yes, Russia may feel this way. No one denies that Russia feels threatened by the existence of NATO and how close they are. But for it to be a justifiable action, you have to prove that NATO is actually a threat to Russia.
Is it not an offensive action to blockade every single state around Russia?
Not inherently.
It is whenever NATO's sole purpose is to counteract Russia.
NATO's original purpose was to counteract Russia.
But there still is their main purpose to this day.
The current purpose of NATO would be a defensive agreement to prevent another world war. It would not be specifically to counteract Russia.
Was that not the United Nations?
Yes.
The United
Nations doesn't do anything.
Yeah, but the United Nations and NATO were built on different principles. The United Nations was built on the principle.
Yes,
United Nations was built on the principle of not allowing another world war.
Right. They were built on different principles.
Was made to counteract Russia. That's why it's only the North American Treaty Organization. It's only in North America, between North America and Europe. Right. That is all. That their only objective was to counteract the Warsaw Pact and Russia influence.
I suppose what I said was wrong. The current objective of NATO is not to prevent another world war. It's to win one, if there is.
That is true.
But that's not specific to Russia. That could be any nation that seeks to pose a threat to North America and Europe.
They have not expanded to any other countries besides the countries that surround Russia.
that is expanding towards China.
Yeah, but
and expanding towards the Middle
why
East.
haven't they let in Japan, South Korea? Why haven't they let in any of the countries that surround China? Because that's not their main goal. Their main goal is to, this is true because we can see the nations that they've admitted, is to surround Russia.
This was true at one point.
This is still true today.
Russia is no longer the Soviet Union. They are a different nation.
It would benefit all of these states to have Russia completely wiped out into a vassal state. And
That's
Russia,
probably true.
so in that, Russia sees these actions as purely offensive by NATO. So what, like we don't know that if NATO would have allowed Ukraine and Georgia to join, and all the Turkmenistan, all these, we don't know if they would have played an offensive action. They might have in 50 years. They might, but if in Russia, you don't know that either. States prioritize self-interest and security. So in the security of protecting your own people, if you have an outside threat that was made only to counteract you, encroaching on your border and almost making a full encirclement, you would be in your best self-interest to stop that from happening.
So I think it's reasonable for Russia to do this. I think they have a reason. I think there is reason for them to think they're being threatened. I think there is reason for them to be worried. There is reason for them to want to control Ukraine. And it is not the same thing as justifiable. The argument has to be that NATO would attack if they were able to surround Russia, which I do not believe, because Russia is not that big a threat anymore, and the United States, which is basically NATO in terms of military power, is generally speaking a just government that does things in the interest of its citizens to protect their rights and life. And
generally speaking.
So, sure, that can always change, but you'd have to show me evidence that it would for Russia to be in the right.
So I have to show you evidence that military blueprints that if they would have gotten Ukraine, that they would have had posed a military offensive.
Or I would need a military history of the United States attacking nations that it saw as a big threat.
Vietnam, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran.
So I can go through these one by one. Iran is the only good example there. Vietnam was not because it viewed the Vietnam government as a threat. It was because they thought they would join the sphere of influence of Russia, and Russia was a threat at the time. The idea in getting involved in Vietnam was to prevent a communist takeover of the country and to protect the freedom of the lives and freedom of the Vietnamese people. The intervention in Vietnam was not inherently bad. Losing it was bad. The involvement that we went in was bad. The loss of American lives was bad. But the action itself was not inherently bad.
But
and now things like Afghanistan.
But the United States acted because they thought that if Vietnam was communist, it would directly be a detriment to their self-interest.
They thought the USSR would take action and create would infringe on the lives and liberty of the Vietnamese people and come for other free nations and infringe on the life and liberty of them.
So is this not the same?
It is not the same.
Russia, Ukraine?
It is not the same because Russia had a military history of taking military action against such nations. The U.S. does not have the same military history as Russia. If Russia were to surround the U.S. with puppet states or defensive allies in the same way that NATO is surrounding
the United States would have definitely acted.
Yes, and they should. The United States should if they did, because Russia has a history of military action in that regard. The United States does not have the same history. But the United States
would Russia not point to all of America's action within the Middle East and North Africa, though?
I mean, they would, but that doesn't make it true. The actions in the Middle East was after 9/11. It was a response to terrorism, and before that, it was a response to either communist intervention or threats of terror in general, or economic well-being in the area. But all military action after 9/11 was justified. in terms of the Middle East. In terms of taking out the Middle East.
We have caused more harm by post 9/11 action than if we would have done nothing.
The goal wasn't prosperity, it was justice. We took out Osama bin Laden. That makes the military campaign justified because we achieved justice for the life lost on 9/11.
So then once we killed Osama bin Laden, we should have been done, right?
Yeah, probably.
But we weren't. So that makes actions at post Osama bin Laden not justified.
You knew what I was talking about. I was talking about the invasion of the Middle East following 9/11.
Your claim was that every single military action in the Middle East post 9/11 was justified, which is not true now.
Right, and I quickly tried to clarify my position in saying in the Middle East, and then as you kept talking, I said at between 9/11 and the death of Osama bin Laden. Because the goal was to achieve justice for the American lives lost and prevent more terrorism from occurring. That makes those actions justified. You can argue we should have done more to control the region and ensure no new terrorism took root. You can say that the leaving Afghanistan was a massive disaster, which it was, and led to more hostility and aggression in the region. But the action itself was not unjust. It was for a very specific means to achieve justice.
Now, what if we said that Osama bin Laden wasn't the main person behind 9/11?
Who do you think was the main person behind 9/11? You have any ideas?
I believe it was the state of Israel. Because in instigating 9/11, this directly, we'll get back to self-interest, this directly benefited their self-interest in facilitating the destruction of 3,000 plus people, American citizens. Because this ushered in over 5, 6 regime changes in which they had already lined out as their main objectives was to destroy 7 nations within the Middle East that caused direct harm to them, which were Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen. What was the last one? There was 2 more, but the last one is Iran. Without 9/11, we would not have been in the Middle East. But what I'm saying,
we were in the Middle East before 9/11.
But we would, but we would not have been in such an impact. But I believe. Have you seen the video of the dancing Israelis?
You've brought it up to me several times.
Yes,
I'm very familiar with it.
Should we show it to our viewers? Why would there
does it prove?
Why would there be 7 Mossad agents dancing? Because why would they be dancing?
They were released by the U.S. government. The U.S. government seems to think they didn't have anything to do with it.
Are you sure?
That's what the U.S. government seems to think.
That's what they seemed to think at the time.
Yes, and I don't have any reason to question them.
So you have no reason to question the U.S. government
about this.
Come on. What about the guy who owned the World Trade Center, taking out an insurance policy the day before, who happened to be a dual Israeli-American citizen? What about the fact that Building 7, which was supposed to get hit that day, exploded for no reason?
Okay, I do think Building 7 is suspicious, but that's not...
With the pit... Okay, think about this.
It's not the smoking gun.
A plane did not fly into the Pentagon. It was a missile. And you can look up footage.
Where's the evidence for this?
Well, it looks like we're out of time for today. Austin, it seems like me and you have very different views on this. And it seems like we really didn't get much. We didn't change, like my view didn't change, your view didn't change.
Yeah, we changed topics a few times as well.
But we will be able to build upon this and use this to analyze future headlines, which y'all will have to stay tuned for. But until then, it's time.